In this video, we're going to cover the EMAC reimbursement packet. To get a copy of the packet, go to www.mohstraining.com. Once you're on our homepage, look at the menu and go to the USAR Task Force page. Once on the USAR Task Force page, you'll notice all the way to the right, there'll be a link for forms. Click on the forms link in the menu. Once on the form page, scroll down and you'll find the link for the reimbursement packet. It'll be the reimbursement packet for EMAC and deployments, and it'll also have the last date it was updated. Click on that link and it will download to your computer. Once the file is downloaded, go and open up the download folder and you'll see the zip file. Go ahead and extract all the files in that zip file. Once you've extracted it, open up the folder and you'll find 4 documents. The first document I'd like to point out is the EMAC Reimbursement Guideline. This document contains all the information you need to make a successful reimbursement claim. It'll give you information what you need to collect while deployed, what you need to do when you return back to Mississippi, and all the information that should be contained in the packet. The next document is a cover letter template. Every reimbursement packet should have a cover letter on the front page. Your cover letter will say who you are and what you're requesting reimbursement for. You can copy and paste this template to your letterhead. All the areas highlighted should be areas that you need to change. Your third document is your invoice. This will be an Excel spreadsheet. This invoice can be used for EMAC reimbursements and non-EMAC reimbursements. The Start tab will give you information on how to use this form, whether it's an EMAC reimbursement or whether it is a non-EMAC reimbursement. The next tab is your document checklist. If you're doing an EMAC reimbursement and you want to be successful, make sure that your reimbursement packet contains all the information in this checklist. Your next tab is your R2 form. This form must be filled out for any EMAC reimbursement request. We try to make this as easy and painless as possible by streamlining this form. The first thing you'll notice is some of these fields are in light gray. Any field in light gray, such as the event name, means you need to look at it and address the information to make sure it's applicable to your requested reimbursement. As you fill this form out, it will auto-populate other fields throughout this invoice. We did this once again to make it easier and quicker for your reimbursement process. I'm going to give the event name a name, test. And I'm going to address some information as far as the mission number, just to show you how the form works. You'll notice below that none of these are actually highlighted in gray. All that information will come over based on how you enter information in the later tabs. Once you get done entering all your reimbursement requested information, if you have any other items not addressed in this reimbursement request, you can enter the value in this field. If you put a value in this field, you must give a detailed explanation of why that information is there and give any supporting documentation for the expenditure. Then at the bottom, whoever is certifying this page, put their title and name and date it. Your next tab is your invoice tab. Once again, address any field in light gray. Starting at the top, this will be your organization or your agency's information. Contact person, who should we contact if we have any questions regarding this reimbursement packet? The next section is information based on what event you're requesting reimbursement for. If it was an EMAC and you fill out R2, some of this information will automatically come over. You'll notice in the event name the test came over and our EMAC number. All this information should be given to you by your task force leader. Next, check all that apply here. What type of work did you do on this deployment? If it wasn't a deployment and you're using this packet for an exercise or training reimbursement, you'd put an X in one of these fields. Then the location of work, any comments that you want. Your totals will bleed over from the rest of the form, and who's filling this form out and their title. Your next tab is your total tab. You'll notice the only light gray field is the work description. Here you would give a description of the work that was completed on the deployment or exercise. The rest of this information will come over from the rest of the invoice as you fill it out. Don't forget to fill out the bottom who's certifying this or who is filling out this information. The next tab is Labor Week 1. You'll notice that we have the invoice set up for a 2-week deployment. Labor Week 1, you'll notice at the top of the form, all the information should bleed over from your previous sheets. Your work unit, this would be the unit that the task force members were assigned to. Then you would list each member from your agency that went on a deployment that you're requesting reimbursement for. Here, put in your first task force member, their title, and so on. Next, go ahead and put in the dates that you're asking reimbursement for. How many hours at regular time did they work? How many hours overtime did they work for the day? Their hourly rate as far as regular time, $10 an hour for an example, 15 overtime. You'll notice the rest of the sheet is auto-calculating the figures. At the bottom, you'll see where you can request fringe benefit. This is different for every agency. Some agencies don't have any policies in place for overtime fringe benefits. If this is the case, leave this blank. If you choose not to figure out the fringe benefits and only request the hourly reimbursement, leave the figures at 0. If you know your percent of fringe benefits, go ahead and put in the percent. Here we'll do an example of 30%. You'll notice it auto-calculates the fringe benefits of your employees. At the very bottom, make sure you put who's certifying or filling out this document, their title, and the date. Your next tab is your backfill for week 1. Remember, EMAC reimbursements very rarely have backfill included. If backfill was included in the reimbursement as far as training and drills, this is the form you would use. You'll notice all the information comes over from your previous tabs. Down here under the backfill, you'll see who worked, Kevin worked, and then who actually did the backfill for them. You put the dates that they worked. Only regular time hours can be reimbursed. So go ahead and put the hours worked at regular time. You only can request up to the amount of the person who they were backfilling for. For an example, if Jane Doe made more than Kevin, you only could put $10. At the bottom, you'll find the fringe benefits and all the auto totals. And once again, certify or who's completing the document, their title and date. Your next 2 tabs are for week 2. These work just like week 1. You have your labor for week 2 and your backfill for week 2. Your next tab is the equipment tab. If you brought any equipment along on a deployment that you want to get reimbursed for, this is the sheet you would fill out. The top information bleeds over. You'd put the work unit information at the top. And then you would list any equipment that you want reimbursement for. Be sure to be very descriptive. Don't just put generator, put the size of generator. Then you'd put the date it was used, how many hours it was used, or if you're requesting the mile reimbursement, how many miles. At what rate are you requesting this information to be reimbursed at? And then a FEMA type code. Once again, make sure that you're addressing the FEMA type codes on the day they're using it and how many hours you're using it. If you brought a generator on a deployment and never used it, you cannot request reimbursement for that. You can only request reimbursement for the hours it was actually used. This information will come all the way to the bottom, auto total, and don't forget to fill out the bottom information on who is filling out this form. Your next tab is the Commodities tab. If you need to purchase any supplies during your deployment and want reimbursement for, this is the form you would use. All the information comes over from the rest of your forms. The vendor or supplier who you got the supplies from, a good description of what you purchased, the date, the quantity, and unit price, and all this will total at the bottom. If you're going to request reimbursement for supplies, make sure it meets these FEMA guidelines stated here at the bottom of the form. Put a comment or explanation of why you needed those supplies during your deployment. And lastly, who's filling out the form, their title and date. Your next tab are your contracts. If you had to have a contract with any vendor for your deployment, this is where you would list it. The number one contract during deployment would be, as an example, food services. If we had a contract with Cisco for a week deployment to give us food for that week, this is where we would list it. Fill in the information, put a comment, and then who's filling out the report, title, and date. The next tab is travel for week 1. Once again, the information at the top of the sheet will come over from the rest of your invoice. Here I gave an example of one task force member, Jane Doe, and a list of dates they were deployed. For Jane Doe, you would list any expenditures as far as travel that you would want reimbursed for, whether it was breakfast, lunch, dinner, lodging, rental vehicle, etc. Remember, any information that you put under any of these columns, we must have receipts included in the reimbursement packet. Each section is divided up for each individual task force member. All the information will come to the bottom and auto total. You can put any kind of description or any notes for any expenditures that you think may be questioned. The next tab is the exact same tab for travel for week 2. Once you have filled out your travel information, the invoice should be complete. If you go to your totals, you'll notice on your totals page, all information entered in the rest of the invoice will bleed over. From your totals page, it'll come into your invoice, and from your invoice into your R2 form, separated out correctly. Use this form to fill out the information on your cover sheet or your cover letter on top of your reimbursement packet. Once you completed your invoice and your cover letter, you need to put it all together in your reimbursement pack with any paychecks, pay stubs, policies, procedures, and any supporting documentation in your packet. As an example, I have an example packet as your 4th document. You'll see the document starts with a cover letter, followed by your R2 form, followed by the invoice, and after your invoices starts your supporting documentation. Once again, any paychecks that went to the individuals for their deployment, their pay stubs, payroll sheets, your policies and procedures on how your employees are paid for overtime, fringe benefits, and any out-of-state travel or deployment reimbursement policies and procedures must be in your reimbursement packet. Your activity log, your ICS 214s, should follow that, followed by all receipts for travel, food, fuel, etc. Once you've completed your packet, put it all together and submit it to your task force leader.